I was in high school. A couple of my friends from the soccer team, I was really big into soccer. My senior year, they started bugging me about getting into track and field. Now, I had no desire to do any type of track and field because it was just running. That's all you did in track and field. I endured the running for soccer. Track and field, that's what you did. As one of my coaches put it, we're doing what other teams do for punishment. We're doing it for fun. It wasn't fun. But as I've said before when I talk about track, it was the greatest social experiment and social experience of my life. I did very little running while I was in track, but when they were starting to tell me, like, hey, you really need to be a part of track. We've got like a small team from the soccer team coming to just run. It's our senior year. We want to be involved in something else besides soccer. And since I'm a Hensley, I was very stubborn at first. I was like, well, no, I'm not going to. I hate running. I don't like to do any of that stuff. But they knew that I was fast, at least soccer fast. I wasn't really track fast, but I was soccer fast. And eventually, because it was my senior year, I just gave way and I was like, fine, I'll run track as long as I'm only doing the sprinting events, because I don't want to do all the long distance stuff. I don't enjoy that. I won't try very hard, but sprinting I will, because it's a short spurt. I'll get all of my energy out and then I'll just be done for the rest of the meet. And I can just watch others and enjoy the track meet that way. And the coach, whenever I joined, we started running, and he was trying us out in all these different races. I told him from the beginning, I said, I am not going to try for long distance. So if you're going to put me in a long distance event, just know that I will lose on purpose. So he was like, okay, we'll put you in sprinting events. So I tried different sprinting events. I did the 100 meter, the 200 meter, 400. And then he had me try the 800. I'll be honest, 800 felt more like long distance than sprinting. So instead of running all of the 2 laps as fast as I could, I very easily, and I say this because I know, because I was there, I very easily could have beat the only other guy that wanted to do the 800. And I was like, I don't want to do the 800. If I beat him, then I'm going to be in that event because I'm the only other one that's running this. And he sets me up. So I was close enough to where it made him feel pressure, but I was going slow enough to where I wouldn't pass him. So I was making sure that he was gaining a lead on me. And then once he gained a significant lead, then I was like, okay, I got to still pretend like I'm trying, but I didn't pass him because I didn't want to run the 800. And guess who ran the 800? He did, not me. So I did those type of things, but I wanted to make sure I ran as fast as I could when we were trying out for the 100. I ran as fast as I could for the 200. I ran as fast as I could for the 400, but anything beyond that, I didn't try very hard. Now, when we got to the track meet, it was at the rival school in the county. So we were at Wood Memorial, and we went to our first track meet at Princeton, in Princeton, Indiana. And we walked in there, and on the bus before we left, the coach stood up and he said, I'm going to tell you where you're going, what events you're doing. And he's going through and he's listing all these events for all these different people. And I'm like, I've got this in the bag. I'm going to do the 100, maybe the 4x1 relay, the 4x4 relay, maybe the 400 or the 200, something like that. So he calls my name. He says, Logan. And I was like, yep. He said, you're going to run the 100. I was like, perfect. He said, you're going to run the 4x4, which is the 4x4 relay. I was like, okay. And then he said, and you're going to do triple jump and long jump. I said, excuse me? He said, triple jump and long jump. No, I heard what you said. I just, why? And I didn't try out for that. I can't jump. Anyone on the soccer team can tell you, I cannot jump. It's not in my gifting. I can run fast. I can't jump. Worth nothing. And he was like, well, we needed someone in those events besides just the one that was in it for long jump, and then triple jump. No one else wanted to do it, so I'm just putting you in there. Okay. I was like, you do realize I've never done track before. When you say triple jump, I don't know what that means. You'll figure it out. That's literally what he told me. Oh, you'll figure it out. So I run my 100, I run the 4x4, and I get to long jump. When I get to long jump, I let me just tell you, someone from Princeton, Indiana, went to state every year of high school up to that point. He was 1 year younger than me, but he went to state his freshman year. He went to state his sophomore year. This was his junior year. And he just kept breaking the school records. I didn't know that. So I go up to this school meet, and I'm asking the other guy that's on our team, how do you even do long jump? Like, I've never done this before. And he's like, when you kind of run, you mark your place. And when you reach the fastest speed that you can reach, you want to do that for just a couple seconds and then jump before the line. If you're on the line, they'll call it a scratch. But jump before the line, and you jump, and you land on both feet as far as you can. But if you fall backwards, they'll do and so he's explaining it to me. So I'm like, okay. So, of course, I go first. Before anyone else that's done it, I'm the one that's going first. So I would go, I marked my spot when we were warming up, and I'm running, and I jump, and I feel like I'm flying in the air. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I land, and they take out the little tape measure. They say like 12'8". And if you know track, that's horrible. So I'm like 12'8". In my mind, I've never done this before. I'm like, that's like way more than twice my height. Like, I feel like I did pretty good. So I go, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I'm like, that was a good run. Well, then guess who went right after me? The guy that's been going to state every year and winning state every year. So he runs, he jumps. They take out the tape measure way longer than they had to for mine. They put it in the ground. It was like 23.5. I'm like, okay, I'm terrible at this. I'm going to tell coach, I don't need to be in this. So I went up to him. I did long jump for the rest of my track career, by the way. But I was like, oh, man, this is embarrassing. And then I had to go again because you had 2 runs. So I went again. I got even shorter than the first time. And I was like, oh, no. So then I get to the triple jump, which no one on my team is on because I just got placed there because they had the event. Someone needed to be in it. So I'm walking around. I'm like trying to watch these people as they're jumping. And there's a very specific technique to the triple jump. It's not 3 broad jumps. It's like a very specific technique. And I'm watching. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to scratch on purpose. I'm going to scratch on purpose. And I ended up talking to one of the other guys that was on the other team. I was like, hey, listen, I'm not going to beat any of you, but just so we're clear, I don't know how to do this, and I want to at least try to do it right. So I had one of the people from the other team teach me how to do triple jump. And I didn't go first that time. I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, I'm not even going to pay attention to what the other times, like other jumps were, because I'm just going to feel bad about myself whenever I get down there. So I do the triple jump thing, and I think I got like 22 foot. And I was like, I got less than the guy doing a long jump with 3 jumps. Like, that's how bad I am at this. And it was crazy because I remember that feeling in the bus of when everything that I expected as going into the track event of like, I'm going to be doing all these sprint things, and to hear you're going to be jumping to. And I was like, wait. I remember the mixed feelings of emotions. And for me, when I was in my dating phase, that I felt that same way. I had expectations of what these other people might be like, what the dream girl might look like and be like, what their personality would be like. But then when I started dating people, and I didn't date a lot of people, it's not that, but when I started pursuing to date people, it came as just this rush of emotions of like, there's no one that I actually want. Like, there's no one out there that fits all of my standards and fits all of the things that I'd built this perfect woman for. I found her, but what I've built this perfect woman for. And I just remember that rush, that confusion of emotions when I started getting to my teenage years and was really starting to get embarrassed because I never had a date. And I wasn't dating anyone. Everyone around me, all my friends, they're dating this girl and that girl and this girl and all these other things. And I think sometimes with dating, it can be just as confusing as hearing that you're going to be in a completely different event that you didn't prepare for. Because there's a lot of things in dating that you just can't prepare for. But you come in with these certain expectations, what qualities you want in the other person, what it would look like, how it would make you feel. And just like track, you get some of them, you get some of those expectations, but then you also get the jumping events. You get the things that you didn't really ask for, you didn't really pursue when you're trying to date this woman or this man, but what you found was that you've got the jumping events too. And everyone expects and wants the things that they want. But then when you start actually meeting real people, you get things that you didn't necessarily ask for. And eventually you find out about these jumping events. So when I was preparing for this message, I listened to a few and kind of considered this like a combination of a few different messages that I heard, because really the Bible doesn't say anything about dating in the way that we think of dating now, right? The Bible, when you got married, it was, here's your parents, they're telling you, you're going to marry these people. That was dating back then. Or it was, like I think of one story in the Bible, and I forget their names off the top of my head, but they walk up and he's like, I'll work for you for 7 years. Is that Jacob and Leah and Rachel? Okay, thank you. Thank you for nodding your head. So Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, instead of just like being an arranged marriage, his dating experience was working for free for the woman's dad. It was a transactional thing, whereas dating now is very different. You go and you talk, and then you meet someone, and then you go on a few dates, and then you start getting all these feelings and emotions, and you know it's really exciting, and then you start looking, maybe I might marry this person, maybe I might propose, maybe I might say yes if he proposes, and then you might get married. But Ben Stewart said it this way: singleness is about devotion. Dating is about evaluation. Who am I supposed to run with for the rest of the days of my life? Dating is about evaluation. It's not a status we sit in, it's a process we move through. And I love how he worded that, because it's very true. Singleness is all about, like we talked about last week, it's all about your devotion to God. It's saying, I'm going to run this race and I'm going to focus on reaching the goal that I have to find and pursue God. So you're running this race, and as you're devoting yourself to the Lord with spiritual disciplines and reading and studying Scripture and praying, as you're running your race, while you're running in a community, you'll find other people that are also running by your side. These people will be your mentors. They'll be brothers and sisters in Christ. They'll maybe even be family members. And as you're running, you'll find someone who's cute. And when you find someone that's cute, you'll start wanting to run closer to them. And as you're running closer to them, you'll think about, maybe I should hold their hand while we run together because they're cute. So you'll find those people as you're running and pursuing God in your devotion in a community that's doing the same. You'll want to run closer. And then as you run and you start evaluating, is this someone that I want to run with and yoke myself with, grab hold of their hand and run for the rest of my life here on earth with them? And so as you're evaluating, even though it doesn't talk about, the Bible doesn't talk about dating as we know it, it talks a lot about evaluation. How you look at the Bible and see if they're actually pursuing that, if they're just running beside you because they think you're cute, or if they're running because they're devoted to God too. And so where dating is not a status that we live in, it's a process we move through, a process of evaluation of, is this someone that I want to run my entire race towards Christ with? You think about dating in the Bible, there's no scripture on Abraham taking Sarah to Applebee's to go watch a movie. Like, you don't see Rachel or Jacob and Rachel and Leah going on a little three-way date and going to the movies or going golfing or going bowling. You don't see any of that. But that process that they moved through, where Jacob and Leah and Rachel, Jacob worked for 7 years, that was the process of evaluation. We don't see necessarily how Abraham and Sarah get together because they're already together when they're introduced in Scripture, but you see them and you see that they had that process of evaluation. It's just different. But in the book of Proverbs is where a lot of these evaluations are found. There's some in the Psalms, and there's some all scattered throughout Scripture, but just a few for you. Proverbs 21, verse 9 says, "It's better to live on the corner of the roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife." Or Proverbs 25, verse 24, which says the same thing, but I'll read it from a different translation. It says, "Better to live on a corner of a roof than to share a house with a nagging wife." This is written to young people who haven't been married yet, right? There's not the guy that's married and he's hanging off the side of his roof and he's like, "Now you tell me." No, they're talking. Proverbs is for young men. That's who it was written to. It's for young women as well, to see this is what it means to be a wise woman. This is what it means to be a good, strong, godly man. And as you're working through those things, it's a way to evaluate if that person lines up with this. So another one, Proverbs 21, verse 19 says, "It's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining wife." Right? All evaluation. It's saying, as you watch her in community, is she constantly involved in drama? Is she treating servers at restaurants poorly? Is she always arguing with one of her friends? If so, you will probably never find peace in your home. So watch in community. Watch and see, because they're not going to treat you that way initially, because part of the dating evaluation phase is to present your best self to them. But once you see them in relationships with their friends who they've been friends with longer than you, or with their own family members, you can expect that eventually they will treat you the same way because they will draw ever so close to you. So if you're evaluating the woman that you want to date, and you're looking and you're saying, she really causes a lot of drama. She's always mad at someone. She's always dealing with all of these different broken relationships. Maybe I don't want that in my home. And so when Proverbs is saying it's better to dangle off the side of the roof than be in the home with the nagging wife, it's saying you will never find peace in your home if you pursue that. Now for the other side, there's one for women too. Proverbs 25:28. It says, "A man without self-control is like a city with broken down walls." And so for women, it's, does he have self-control? Does he treat people poorly? Does he maybe even tip well? Is he generous? Is he easily angered with people as you see him in community? Is he doing all of these shady deals and undercutting his own morality and his own standards and values to get ahead in the business world? If so, he's probably going to treat you the same way. He's not going to be faithful. He's not going to be loyal. You don't necessarily know if he's going to lie to you or not. If you see him lying to others, he's going to lie to you too. And so it's this evaluation of, is this man someone who I want to run with for the rest of my life? Dating is all about evaluation. How do they live their life? Do they treat others poorly? How do they treat people? Are they generous? Are they loving towards others? Do their values measure up with the values that I have? And you ask these questions because it's going to help you see past what culture pushes as far as dating. Culture will always push in the dating world charm and beauty, especially now. And it's because back when like Match.com first came out, they had algorithms. And in these algorithms, it was a way for people to present what they wanted and who they were, and it would match them up. And Match.com would say, this is a perfect match. But as they started doing more research, they found that all of these perfect matches were not lasting past the first date. And they're like, well, what's wrong with our algorithm? Because clearly something's not working. Clearly, like they can't even make it past the first date. And they did all this research, spent all this money, and there was actually nothing wrong with the algorithm. It was just simply the fact that people didn't actually know what they wanted. And they were presenting a version of themselves that they wanted to be, but they weren't living up to their own standards. And so it was the problem with people. So what dating apps did was they took a huge step back and they said, well, if you can have a really charming bio line, And you can have a really attractive picture of yourself, then people will swipe right or left, whatever way you're supposed to swipe. I did dating the old-fashioned way. I found her in high school. So I didn't have to do the dating app, but like whatever way, it's presenting beauty and charm. And if you have teenagers, I'm about to embarrass Chloe. If you have teenagers, you've probably heard of the term Riz, right? Anyone ever heard that term from a teenager's mouth? Some of you? Yeah, you've heard it. Right? Well, in case you ever hear this term Riz, it's short for charisma, which is also charm. So there's to make the thing. But for the teenagers in the room that are over here, Riz might get you someone to date, but it's not going to keep them. Okay? Because beauty and charm are very faulty. In fact, in Proverbs or 2 Corinthians, nope, I didn't put it in my notes. There's a proverb that says, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. And when you look at that, that's what all relationships going into it, dating relationships, they're presenting that forward. But what actually happens is Proverbs is like, your charm is going to flee. It's not going to exist. It's going to deceive you. But for beauty, it's also going to fade. Right? Your beauty as a person now is going to look different when you're older, because you'll get more wrinkles and except for Grandmama. She will always and forever be beautiful. But your beauty will start to fade. And even as it fades, it can fade with personality. If you know someone who has a terrible personality, but they're attractive, they become less attractive because of their personality. So as you're presenting these things forward in dating, just know that those are very faulty. They're not going to last for very long. And that's honestly what led me to Chloe a few years ago. There are cute girls in the school. It's not that. It's just none of them feared the Lord like I saw and what I wanted to see. So as I was evaluating them, I never dated anyone unless I saw that they feared the Lord. And even though there were some that I found attractive, and as I evaluated, before I even took the step, I was like, they're not for me. And then when Chloe was standing in front of the majority of the town at a pep rally, and she thanked God in front of everyone, and she was the only one out of that entire group of basketball players that did that after they won state. That's what drew me to her. I was like, wow, instantly in that moment, I was like, that's the most important person in the room right now. And if I hadn't have been evaluating the way that I had, I might not have reached her in the hallway in front of the library. I might not have pursued that, but because I did spend so much time evaluating who do I want to run my race with, who's going in the same direction as me, she stuck out like a sore thumb. It was like no one else but her. And eventually that led me to date her. And as we were dating each other, I was not only evaluating if she was running this race, but if she was running at the same pace. I knew I was going to be a pastor. I already accepted my call into the ministry. And so whenever she starts running alongside me, I'm like, I don't know if if you necessarily want to keep up. If you want to keep up with pastoral ministry, because this is something completely different. It's a whole new pace in your walk. And then she felt the call to do that. And so we started running faster and faster together. But I also had to evaluate, and you also need to evaluate, on how to be equally yoked. Are you equally yoked together? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what does righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? He talks about being yoked together, and that's a farming reference from Deuteronomy chapter 22. It's also a reference to another thing, which we'll get to in a minute, but it's that main farming reference. If you know what a yoke is, probably you do. But it was a big wooden beam that they would put together, or lost all my words, but you'd put them on ox. And the two oxen would would go together in the same direction to plow the fields. If they start going in separate directions, it would mess up the whole field. Or if there's just one ox and maybe a donkey beside, then they would start just going in circles. And what Paul is saying as far as farming goes, you would never put a weaker animal next to a stronger animal because you're just going to go in circles. The weaker one is not going to be able to keep up. But also, you have to be running at the same pace. Because if one ox is going slower than the others, you're still going to be going in circles. And you got to make sure that these are going in the same direction. Because if they're going opposite directions, you're not going to go anywhere. Deuteronomy 22, which is the reference, says, do not plow with an ox and donkey yoked together. So these yokes go on their backs, around their necks, and they would plow the field. They would move in the same direction. And it's the same thing with relationships. Paul is saying, don't marry someone who isn't a follower of Christ, if you are one, because one of three things will happen. And that's where I'm going to invite Chloe to come up and do a little illustration. We're thankful for Mama up here, because she's able to hold him as we do this. So when you start running your race with someone, you get yoked together, right? I don't have handcuffs or anything, so we're just going to be yoked together with our hands. So we're running our race together, right? If I am not a follower of Christ and she is, if she has the stronger personality, what's going to happen? She's going to start dragging me to church, dragging me to church meetings, dragging me to all these other things, and it's not going to be fun for her to drag me. It's not. And so it's like, why would I want to be in a relationship with her if I'm just going to have to go to all these boring meetings all the time? But if I'm the stronger personality, then the second thing that's going to happen is I'm going to start dragging her. And eventually, as I'm pulling and tugging, she's going to compromise. She's going to say, well, I guess we can go to the basketball game instead of going to church. I guess we can stay home with the kids for just a little bit before going to church. I guess I really don't have to go to the women's event. I guess I really don't have to do these things because I'm pursuing something else. And now she's compromising, which means that she will never live out what God has truly called her to. But then the third thing that happens, because I'm not going to have any fun dragging her away from church, and she's not going to have any fun being drugged. But if we both have equally strong personalities, then what's going to happen? I'm going to go this way, she's going to go this way, and you can see the incredible tension that's going to be straining on a marriage to where eventually, I don't want you to fall, it will break. Eventually that will break because the tension will become too much to keep the marriage stable. And what you find is that one or the other or both will start cheating on each other because there's that tension. They'll start pursuing other relationships because there's that tension. And it's like the whole thing of that I heard years ago. You can go sit down. There's that thing that I heard years ago. It's like, you can be a Christian but not go to church. The same way that you can be married but never go home. You can have that tension. Eventually, when it breaks, you might still be together, and you might be legally married together, but a long time ago, you guys broke off from each other. And you come into church maybe, or you come into the world, and you're like, man, our marriage is fine. We're doing great. But the reality is that the relationship's completely broke off. And Paul is saying, why would you want to do that to yourself? Right? Why would you want to leave what God's purpose is for you? Why would you want to go to all these boring meetings if that's not your value and your goal? Don't yoke yourself together with someone who isn't a follower of Christ. And as you're running in the same direction, you find that person. You also, like I mentioned before, you got to make sure you're going the same pace. Right? If I had accepted my call into ministry and I was going to be a pastor and Chloe got her Bible 2 weeks before we started dating, it probably wouldn't have been the right time. But if we're running in that same pace like we were, and she was willing to speed up her pace a little bit so that we could go, then it worked out in the timing that it did. And I'm not saying that if they're not running at the same pace now that they won't be later. But it's probably not the right time for that relationships to start being yoked together. Just think about if you're on fire for God and you're like, man, I'm feeling called to go to some third world country and preach the gospel to everyone. And you look over at someone and they're like, I got my Bible last week. I just became a Christian. They're probably not going to be ready to go and run with you. But they might later. So you got to use some wisdom and guidance on that. But lastly, you want to have good chemistry. A lot of the times that I saw in church and with church friends from church, and like we didn't necessarily always go to church camp, but people who would go to church camp and they'd have like their camp girlfriends and stuff. It was like, well, like I'm wanting to date this guy because, you know, he loves the Lord and you know, he's on fire for God and, you know, he loves the Lord with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength. Well, how compatible are you? Like, what's the chemistry going on there? Oh, he's really, really boring. Why would you want to date them? Like, if you don't have a good chemistry, it doesn't matter how much he loves the Lord. If you don't have good chemistry, you don't have good chemistry. Right? If he bores you to tears, don't date him. You don't have to. You don't have to marry him. Like, you just don't. If she bores you to tears, don't tell anyone, but keep it to yourself, but you don't have to date her. You don't have to yoke yourself together. There's has to be some level of chemistry. And as you're walking through this, and maybe even walking your kids through this, right? Because I know a lot of you are married, or some of you, you don't have a desire to be in a relationship right now, and that's fine. But if you're walking with teens, if you're walking with your own kids through this, it's good to understand that some people do go through this, and your teens are going to go through this. They're going to walk through this. Some of them already are walking through this. But as they're walking through it, or as you're walking through it, it's easy to isolate yourself and say, there's not a guy out there, there's not a girl out there that fits everything, that checks all the boxes. And there's probably two things that are happening if you're saying that. One, you've set non-negotiables that really don't matter. Meaning that some of your non-negotiables are like, you know, for me, if I set the non-negotiables of, you know, she has to be a soccer player or she has to love soccer because that's how I reach my community is through soccer. That's how I reach my friends with the gospel of Jesus Christ because I play soccer and I'm involved in soccer. But if she doesn't play soccer and I make that a non-negotiable, I know that's really simple and petty, but like there are some things that are like that don't seem like that on the surface. But if I said it that way, then I would have never gotten with Chloe. But if I not lowered my standard, but said, hey, my non-negotiable is that you have to love the Lord, your God, with all your soul, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And you need to pursue your purpose with a passion that reaches the lost. If I use soccer as an avenue and she used basketball as an avenue, we might have different interests, but we're still going in the same direction. And so you got to look at your non-negotiables, but you also are probably just looking in the wrong places. When you start thinking about guys and girls who love the Lord with all their heart, it seems on the surface that there's no girl or no guy that would be at that same level, but there is. I've seen them. I've encountered them. And what I would say is that you're probably looking in the wrong place. If you're one of the pastors that I listened to this past week, he said, if you're looking for a unicorn, you're never going to find it. But what you got to realize is that guy is probably a kangaroo. And if you're trying to find a kangaroo in the middle of Wyoming, you're not going to find one. So you got to walk 500 miles, and then another 500, and then another 500 so that you can find the guy of your dreams. So maybe it's not that you've set your standards too low, because you don't need to set your standards too low. If you want to date today, just set your standards ultra low, and you can get married today if you wanted. But if you're really pursuing someone who loves the Lord and you can't find him, then you need to go look somewhere else. And I'm not saying that church is the place to necessarily do this, but since we're a community of believers, it's very possible that you could find someone here. or find someone else in this community that also goes to church, because as you're running your race and you're pursuing God, you're going to start noticing these people who are running at the same pace with you. They're running beside you. They're wanting to take care of you. And the cute ones, you're going to run next to them. You're going to start evaluating and keep the main thing the main thing. Are we pursuing our purpose with passion? Are we pursuing God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength? Then maybe this will work out. Because in all of this, as you navigate through the waves of life crashing over you, dating sometimes feels like you're in the middle of a storm and you're being bombarded with all this information from TikTok influencers and social media people and your mom and your dad and your siblings and your brothers and your sisters and your cousins and your aunts and your uncles, all of those things. You're getting all these different things coming at you, and it feels like waves are just crashing over you. But know that we serve a God who controls the seas. We serve a God who knows what tomorrow holds. We serve a God who is in control of all of it. So if you just pursue him and say, God, I know you'll take care of it, because most people who are single will not end up being single for the rest of their lives. Some people choose it, some people don't. Some people pursue relationships and they're always heartbroken, or they never find that person. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be single forever. So as you're pursuing these dating relationships, just pursue God, and God will start introducing you to people and say, hey, look at that cute girl over there. She's running with you. She's running at the same pace. Or look at that cute guy. He's running at the same pace. Maybe you should go run by him. And as you run by him and you evaluate, then you see that God introduced you to this person. Chloe and I, we went to the same high school all 4 years, and she was in junior high for 2 of those of my 4. But we went to the same school, and it was all in the same building. I was in the junior high all the time because I had a high school class in there. We probably passed each other numerous times, but until I was pursuing my purpose and I was running towards God, then God introduced me to her. But we serve this God who controls the winds, rain, and the seas, a God who sent his only son, Jesus, to die in your place. So pursue him with passion and watch how he introduces you to people. Watch how he removes obstacles as you run your race together. Watch as he leads you and guides you through the dark valleys and by the still waters, and how he refreshes your soul. Keep running your race. And as we talk about marriage next week after the marriage workshop, which is this Saturday, we're going to see as we transition from singleness to dating and then marriage, how really the main thing is the main thing. We're trying to pursue God by ourselves and with someone else.